Emergence errors cost the most yield loss from the planter's perspective. There are 4 aspects of the planter pass which can induce these errors, the first of which can be avoided by planting into consistent moisture. It may seem simple to turn the pivot on after you have planted a field and call it good, but depending upon the situation, it could be causing 36 or more bushels per acre in yield loss. In our lighter soils, the first step to ensure the seed is in consistent moisture is to ensure we have properly formed the furrow. A properly formed furrow is when you hold up the closing system and the furrow is completely intact. But if you touch the sidewall of the furrow, it begins to collapse. If the furrow collapses on its own, we are wasting what moisture was at planting depth, as the dry dirt is going to absorb moisture first before the seed will have an opportunity to imbibe, resulting in a late emerging plant. When a furrow collapses on its own, this is the result of not carrying enough weight on the gauge wheels relative to soil moisture. To solve this, you need to carry more weight on the gauge wheels and/or pre-irrigate. When we have the furrow formed properly, then we want the seed in a consistent level of seed available moisture. This can be consistently dry when we are waiting on a rain event or a pivot pass to bring the soil up to an adequate level, or we plant directly into an adequate moisture environment. One thing to keep an eye on during the planting season is that the gauge will remain snug against the disc openers. If dry dirt works up between the gauge wheel and the disc opener, this dirt will rooster tail straight into the bottom of the furrow, further reducing what moisture is available to evenly germinate the seed. Corn has to imbibe 30% of its weight in water in the first 36 hours after being planted in order to germinate evenly. As we pull into each field, we need to get out and double check how well we are forming the furrow and making sure we are planting at a depth where the seed is in consistent moisture. The challenge is, with this, you are only collecting a few data points and projecting that assumption upon the rest of the field. The furrow moisture metric from SmartFarmer provides a high-resolution map of what soil moisture is from the seed's perspective across the field. In our lighter, wind-blown soils, we are wanting a reading of at least 40% furrow moisture for corn and cotton, and at least 45% furrow moisture for milo. As you are planting along and you find your moisture levels fluctuating down below these points and the pivot will be getting to these drier parts of the field within 12 hours, you may only be losing up to 12 bushels per acre. If it will be taking longer than 12 hours for the pivot to get to these drier spots of the field in corn and milo, you will want to increase your planting depth to get to a more consistent moisture in order to drive consistent imbibing of moisture and even emergence. With Smart Depth, you can manually set the depth and see what moisture the seed can imbibe at that depth, reducing the friction of having to get out of the cab and make a depth change. If you are in a field where clay particles are occasionally building up on the lens of SmartFarmer, we would recommend running in the manual depth setting and allowing the furrow moisture metric to guide your depth choices. When SmartFarmer is staying clean, put Smart Depth in automatic mode and set the minimum depth to 1/4 inch deeper than the shallowest you want to plant at. Set the default depth at the depth you are normally planting at plus 1/4 inch. Set the maximum depth to the deepest you would dream of planting plus 1/4 inch. This is typically going to be 3 inches. The minimum moisture target would be 40% for corn and 45% for milo. The maximum moisture target would be 5% higher than the minimum moisture. We would encourage you to run some passes where you scale down the moisture target by 5%, as well as some passes where you scale up the moisture by 5% over the recommended targets, to deploy some variables to further understand what moisture levels different crops need in the high plains. When deploying these variables, we encourage you to use a custom hybrid with the percent of range for those passes to ease in-season and harvest evaluation. As additional questions come up for your operation, which we did not answer in this clinic, feel free to call your Client Success Advisor, or if you do not have one, drop us a line at 208-250-3455. Until next time, make it a blessed day.